Suddenly, there was an explosion in the hospital laboratory. I and the hospital goddess Isabella were simultaneously trapped in the fire. My boyfriend Cain heartlessly abandoned me and chose to save Isabella first. I didn't stop him or beg him. I let him leave me in the raging fire. Just because in my previous life I confessed that I was the daughter of the hospital director and used his future to ask him to save me, while Isabella was buried in the fire. Later, he inherited my family's property and couldn't wait to lock me, who was due to give birth, in the laboratory and burn me and my child to death with a fire. Facing me who was pleading desperately, he grinned hideously and said, "Aurora. If it weren't for you threatening me with the Aurora family back then, how could Isabella have died so tragically? The suffering Isabella endured in the fire, I want you to pay back 100-fold." When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn on the day when I was simultaneously trapped in the fire with the hospital goddess Isabella. With a loud bang, the cabinet hit me hard. The pain made me instantly awake. Despite the intense pain in my body, I tried hard to see everything in front of me, but I was choked by the thick smoke and couldn't open my eyes. I could only cover my mouth and cough violently. At this time, there was a throbbing pain in my lower abdomen. I subconsciously protected my stomach. "Baby, hold on." But the lower abdomen, which was about to give birth, became flat. How could this be? Before I could react, there were bursts of urgent shouts in my ears. "Isabella! Isabella! How are you? Why is this voice so familiar?" Immediately after, Isabella's weak voice came from the other side. "Cain, save me." I looked up in disbelief and saw Cain half kneeling beside Isabella, frantically moving the table that was pressing on her. Looking at the two people in front of me, I could hardly breathe. Wait. Didn't I just be locked in the laboratory by Cain and burned to death alive? And my child? Thinking of this, I curled up in pain and couldn't stop shaking all over. At the laboratory door, my colleague Grace shouted heartbreakingly, "Cain! Are you crazy? Save Aurora first. She is your girlfriend." The picture in front of me was so real that I realized that I wasn't dreaming. I was reborn. Reborn on the day when I was simultaneously trapped in the fire with the hospital goddess Isabella. With a creak, Cain finally moved the table away. He didn't even look at me. He picked up Isabella and rushed out. I laughed at myself. In my previous life, wasn't he like this too? I am his girlfriend, but he only has Isabella in his eyes. Yes, Isabella is so beautiful. In the hospital, she is not only a goddess-like existence but also rumored to be the daughter of the Isabella family medical. Even if Cain is not single, he must have fallen in love with her long ago. I struggled to stand up, but I was firmly pressed by the cabinet. My calf was cut by glass and bleeding profusely. I couldn't move at all. Cain seemed to see me only now. There was no trace of worry in his eyes, only disgust. He frowned and said, "Isabella is the daughter of the Isabella family. If something happens to her, the hospital will be finished. I am doing this for the overall situation. You are not seriously injured. Wait until I send Isabella out and then come back to save you." I laughed again. If I hadn't been reborn once, I might have believed his so-called, for the overall situation. I was covered in blood, but in his mouth, I was not seriously injured. Grace wanted to rush into the fire without thinking. Fortunately, she was firmly held back by her colleagues behind her. "Grace, calm down. The laboratory is full of flammable and explosive items. It's very dangerous." Yes, in my memory, this laboratory will explode in about 15 minutes. In my previous life, after I was rescued, I quickly asked everyone to leave quickly, which saved everyone's lives. Originally, Cain wanted to go back and save Isabella again, but when he saw the growing fire, he still didn't go in again. So in this life, how can I believe that he will come back to save me later? I know he won't. But I don't want to implicate those who really care about me. I propped myself up on the ground with all my strength and shouted with all my might, "Grace, don't come in. It's about to explode here. Run quickly." Hearing me say explosion, Cain paused in his steps while holding Isabella. He looked back at me in disbelief. His eyes were cold, as if looking at a stranger. Aurora, how come I just realized that you are so scheming? It will only take half an hour. When the fire alarm arrives, the fire can be controlled. What will the colleagues outside think of me if you say that? Can't you learn from Isabella and be a little more kind? I was amused by his sanctimonious appearance. When you were in bed with me, why didn't you say I was scheming? Seeing this, Isabella gently pulled Cain's collar and said in a weak voice, Cain, I'm uncomfortable. Hearing Isabella's voice, Cain instantly moved his eyes away from me and turned to Isabella. Hold on, Isabella. I will never let anything happen to you. After saying that, he held her and left without looking back. I pushed the heavy cabinet away with all my strength. Piercing pain came in waves, but, compared to the pain I experienced in my previous life, this is nothing. Seeing this scene, Grace sat on the ground in disbelief. Cain. You bastard. The director will not let you go like this. Grace is the only person in the hospital who knows my identity. But these words only in exchange for Cain's even more ruthless ridicule. He sneered contemptuously, and his tone was full of disdain. The director won't let me go? Ridiculous. Isabella is the only daughter of Isabella Family Medical. If something happens to her, the director will not let me go. I struggled to crawl out from the gap between the cabinet and the ground. The wound on my leg was torn open, and my whole body was stained red with blood. But I couldn't care so much anymore. I had to live. Seeing that time was running out, I suddenly shouted at Grace, don't beg him. Run quickly. I will never forget the moment when Cain poured gasoline on me in my previous life. There was a crazy light flashing in his eyes. There was not a trace of love, only overwhelming hatred. He completely ignored my cries and even ignored my child in my belly. He set me on fire. Only then did I know that all these years he had blamed Isabella's death on me. He was so, hating me. I hadn't recovered from that heart-wrenching memory when Grace had already run in regardless of the fire. Aurora. Hold on. The thick smoke made me cough nonstop. My vision was blurred. Only Grace's thin figure was exceptionally clear in the firelight. You're fucking crazy. Get out. Grace ignored my roar. She gritted her teeth, struggling to lift half of my body and move step by step out of the laboratory. The scorching air burned our skin. I even saw a lock of her hair being scorched. The ends of her hair still had sparks, but she seemed to feel no pain as she continued to drag me forward. Looking at her blackened profile, I had mixed feelings. I struggled to raise my hand and glanced at my watch. Time was running out. If we didn't get out soon, we would both be doomed here. I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay awake as I shouted at her, Grace, when I count 321 later, we jump out. Don't worry about me. Got it. Grace replied without looking back, you just shout. I definitely won't let go. My heart warmed. Without further ado, I stared fixedly at the laboratory door. That was the hope of life. 3, 2, 1. Jump! I roared with all my strength and then without hesitation pulled Grace and threw ourselves towards the door. Boom! Almost at the same moment we rushed out of the door, there was a deafening explosion behind us. The huge shock wave flipped me over. I felt like my eardrums were about to be shattered. My vision was blank. I couldn't see anything or hear anything. Only the endless ringing echoed in my mind. Aurora! Aurora! Are you okay? Can you hear me? I don't know how long it took before Grace's anxious voice came into my ears intermittently. I tried to open my eyes. I'm fine, just my leg. Grace followed my gaze and looked down. It's not good looking. Don't look. Wait for me. After saying that, Grace hurriedly ran away. Before long, Grace rushed up with several colleagues carrying a stretcher. When they saw the injury on my leg, their faces changed. One of the young male colleagues even exclaimed directly, my God. This? How many stitches will this need? My whole body ached terribly as if it was falling apart, but I was still conscious. When passing by an emergency department, I saw Cain. He was gently holding Isabella's shoulder and comforting her in a soft voice, as if nothing had happened. As if he had completely forgotten about me. A head nurse who usually had a good relationship with me was checking my injury while shaking her head in distress. Aurora, what kind of sin have you committed? There are too many fractures all over your body. It may take a whole year to recover. As she spoke, her voice became choked with sobs. Fortunately, your right hand is not injured. After recuperation, you can still perform surgeries. I smiled weakly. I wanted to say something but was so painful that I couldn't say a word. The head nurse lowered her voice again, as if afraid of being heard by someone, and muttered in a low voice, "That Isabella, I heard that it's just a minor skin injury. Look at how nervous Dr. Cain is. TSK. Hearing this, Grace couldn't help getting angry and pointed at Cain's nose and cursed, "Cain, you're so disgusting." Before Grace could finish speaking, Isabella coughed weakly a few times. Her voice was delicate. "Cain, I'm a little tired." Cain immediately comforted her tenderly. "Isabella, bear with it a little longer. Colleagues will be here soon." Then, he raised his head and looked at me. Then he said impatiently to Grace, "Isn't Aurora fine now? What does my business with Aurora have to do with you? Can you mind your own business?" I stared firmly at Cain's disgusting face and said word by word, "From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. Let's break up." Grace nodded heavily. "Good breakup. What's the use of reasoning with a beast?" Cain was stunned for a moment. Apparently, he didn't expect me to say that. He frowned and said impatiently, "Aurora, what are you up to now? Playing with me?" I sneered. "Playing with you? Are you worthy?" I desperately held back my tears and looked at Isabella behind him. I asked word by word, "You would rather save another woman than save me? Is this the boyfriend you talk about?" Isabella's tears came immediately. She cried beautifully. "Aurora, how can you say that about Cain? He just knows that you are stronger than me. He has more confidence in you. He just chose to save someone who needs him more." The ward was in chaos. Cain's accusations and Isabella's sobbing intertwined, attracting the attention of countless onlookers outside. Well, what the goddess said makes sense. She is so delicate and definitely needs someone to take care of. That's right. Dr. Cain is also for the good of everyone. Why is Dr. Aurora so persistent? That's right. Miss Isabella is the daughter of Isabella Family Medical. Saving her is more important. At this time, my dad hurried back from abroad. When Cain saw him, he suddenly changed his face and greeted him. "Director." Just now there was an explosion in the laboratory. I risked my life to save Isabella. Isabella said that she can make Isabella Family Medical strengthen cooperation with our hospital. My dad's face darkened. "Where is Aurora?" Cain thought the director was going to hold him accountable. He hurriedly said, "Director, at that time, only she and Aurora were in the laboratory. Isabella is definitely sure that she didn't make any mistakes. This matter is entirely Aurora's responsibility. She was just rescued. Her injury is not serious. But I suggest that she should not participate in experiments in the future. Isabella alone can do it." My dad's face became even uglier. I was lying on the hospital bed, sneering in my heart. Wait and see. Without me, Aurora, from now on, you, Cain, will also have endless hardships. Before I could see my dad's appearance clearly, I fell into a deep coma again. When I woke up again, it was already the evening of the next day. My hands and feet were wrapped in thick plaster and bandages and I couldn't move at all. But I felt like being reborn. "Aurora." Grace was exhausted but couldn't hide her excitement as she threw herself by my bedside. I wanted to raise my hand to respond to her, but it pulled at my wound and caused intense pain. Looking at me like this, she couldn't hold back anymore. Tears fell down patter. "You fool. Do you know how seriously injured you are?" I smiled weakly. "At least, I got my life back. In this life, I don't owe Cain anything. Neither my father nor I will die." "You!" Grace cried and laughed at the same time. While taking out a tissue, she said, "I have already told your father what happened. When he heard the news, he was so angry that he will hold an accident accountability meeting tomorrow." Hearing the news about my father, my tears couldn't be held back either. In my previous life, because of me, my father ended up, Grace. I tried to calm down my emotions. There is still one thing I want to ask you. You say, what's the matter? The laboratory. Before the accident, the surveillance video of the laboratory. You help me get it. Grace touched my hair and said in a relaxed tone, don't worry. I've already asked someone to get it. There was a small problem in the middle. But don't worry. I've already solved it. I looked at her, and guilt overwhelmed me like a tide. In my previous life, I was brainwashed by Cain and also thought that Grace was jealous of me and targeted me everywhere. I even had a big fight with Grace and cut off our friendship. I didn't get a chance to apologize to Grace until I died. Now thinking about it, I can only blame myself for being blind and mistaking fish eyes for pearls. I had just wanted to close my eyes and rest when Cain came. Behind him, he also brought Isabella. She was standing properly without a single strand of hair out of place. She was charmingly flipping her hair, attracting the attention of everyone around. Looking at me again, I was wrapped in layers of plaster and couldn't move. Grace took a deep breath and said sarcastically, the goddess is fine, as if nothing happened. Cain ignored her. Instead, he came over and wanted to hold my hand. I avoided him in disgust. Not only did he not think he was wrong, but he actually smiled and said, Aurora, look, aren't you fine? Isabella said that she will strengthen the cooperation between Isabella Family Medical and our hospital. I have a chance of promotion. Aren't you happy for me? I couldn't help but sneer. Happy? I almost died in the laboratory. You want me to be happy? At this time, Isabella pretended to sigh. Her eyes darkened and she said, I didn't expect you to be so selfish. For this unnecessary jealousy, you would rather ruin Cain's future. Seriously. I really looked down on you. I looked at her coldly and said, do you know what it means to have a ruined future? I'll tell you. From the moment Cain gave up saving me, his future is gone. Cain pointed at me. His brows were wrinkled so much that they could crush a fly. Aurora. Isabella kindly came to see you. She originally wanted to apologize to you. And you have such an attitude? Don't forget, I am your boyfriend. You don't appreciate me. Instead, you curse me. This lousy job of yours can earn you how much money? Everything I do is for our future. I found the man in front of me even more disgusting. Suppressing the anger in my heart, I said to Cain, Cain, don't forget that we have broken up. Get out of here. There was a lot of commotion in the ward. People outside started chatting. I say, now that Dr. Aurora is fine, just let it go. What can be more important than your boyfriend's future? If it were me, I would endure a little hardship. After all, when Dr. Cain is successful in the future, I can enjoy the blessings too. Grace suddenly turned her head and pointed at those people outside who were peeking and cursed, don't gossip. It's not like that. The director will hold an accident accountability meeting tomorrow. When the truth comes out, I'll see who gets slapped in the face. Cain, who had always treated Grace as if she were invisible, finally looked at her properly. Frowning, he asked, what did you say? What accident accountability? Grace put her hands on her hips and while speaking, she didn't forget to stare at Isabella. Yes. Some people know very well how the laboratory accident was caused. Hearing this, Isabella's body visibly trembled. The originally fair face instantly lost all color. The whole person seemed as if she would faint in the next second, full of a sense of fragility. Seeing this, Cain quickly and affectionately supported Isabella and comforted her in a soft voice, Isabella, don't be afraid. It's okay. I believe you. Isabella, take advantage of the situation, fell into Cain's arms. Looking up pitifully, with tears in her eyes, she said in a trembling voice, Cain, I believe you won't believe what they are talking nonsense, right? That day in the laboratory, I clearly reminded Aurora. At this point, she deliberately paused as if recalling something terrible. Her body couldn't help but tremble again. She said intermittently, I reminded her, to be careful. But she didn't listen, and said I was meddling. Later there was an explosion. I really tried my best. I really wanted to save her. As soon as it was quiet outside, after hearing what Isabella said, people started to condemn me again. So it was Dr. Aurora's operational error that caused the explosion. No wonder Dr. Cain didn't save her. After all, Isabella is innocent. Seeing Isabella's weak and helpless appearance, Cain was even more distressed. His anger was instantly ignited. He suddenly turned his head and pointed at my nose and roared, "Aurora! Are you justified in not correcting your mistakes? If you apologize to Isabella now, I can say a few words for you at tomorrow's meeting so that you won't." Grace and I looked at each other and smiled. I interrupted his words. "If the two of you kneel down and apologize to me now, I can also show you some mercy at tomorrow's meeting." Isabella said with a half-smile, "Aurora, I am doing this for your own good. Why don't you appreciate it?" I didn't want to deal with the two people in front of me anymore and pressed the nurse call button. The head nurse hurriedly pushed through the crowd and came in. "What's wrong?" I pointed at Cain and Isabella and said, "As far as I remember, Dr. Cain and Dr. Isabella are not from this department, right? Why are they so derelict in their duties?" The head nurse didn't like Cain originally. With a cold face, she said, "Dr. Cain, don't disturb Dr. Aurora here anymore. She has had surgery for a whole night." Seeing that I was completely unyielding, Cain pointed at me and said, "You, for a long time." Finally, he angrily took Isabella's hand and left. Grace looked at me for a long time and said, "I think you have changed." I twitched the corner of my mouth. I couldn't tell if it was a bitter smile or self-mockery. After dying once and seeing clearly whether Cain is a human or a dog. This epiphany comes at a great cost. After my father dealt with the urgent matters at hand, he rushed to my ward to see me. His eyes were bloodshot, his beard was unshaven, and his face was full of worry and fatigue. "Aurora, how could you? Dad just went abroad not long ago. How could this happen?" He choked up and couldn't speak. His trembling hand gently stroked the gauze on my face, looking extremely distressed. Looking at this father who seemed much older, I couldn't hold back any longer and burst into tears. In my previous life, because I wrongly trusted Cain, the hospital that the Aurora family had run for decades was transferred to others. All the property was gone. My father couldn't bear this blow and fell ill. He passed away soon, and Cain, stepping on the bones of the Aurora family, flourished all the way and became a new star in the medical field. But now, he is still alive. I held his hand back and choked up and said, "Grace should have told you everything. The laboratory exploded, but that was the laboratory Dad gave me. How could I not cherish it? It definitely wasn't caused by me." My dad's voice was low and hoarse, with suppressed anger. "Good daughter, don't worry. No matter whether she is really the daughter of Isabella Family Medical, Dad is not afraid. I won't let you take the blame for nothing." Early the next morning, Grace pushed me in a wheelchair to the meeting site. Saying it was a meeting was actually more like a criticism session. Cain and Isabella sat opposite me. One was more tragic looking than the other, as if I was the one who was extremely guilty. The conference hall was filled with the hospital's high-level executives. My dad sat at the front, his face livid. When he saw me coming in, a trace of distress flashed in his eyes, but soon he became serious again. "Dr. Isabella," my dad stared closely at Isabella. "At that time, only you and Dr. Aurora were in the laboratory. You said it was Dr. Aurora's operational error?" Isabella's body trembled as if she was frightened. Her voice was as soft as water. "Director, it's absolutely true. I reminded Dr. Aurora." "Remind?" My dad suddenly slapped the table, scaring Isabella so much that her tears almost fell. "Do you know what the consequence of lying is?" Cain frowned and immediately stood up to defend his goddess. "Director, why are you so sure that Dr. Isabella is lying?" My dad gave him a cold look. "It's not your turn to speak here yet." Cain was immediately speechless and sat back awkwardly. Although he was also somewhat famous in the hospital, in front of my dad, he didn't dare to say a word. Isabella's eyes were red. Looking pitifully, she said, "Director, how could I joke about the reputation of the Isabella family?" "The Isabella family?" The conference hall immediately exploded. Those high-level executives who were originally dozing off suddenly became energetic and started whispering and discussing. She is really the daughter of Isabella Family Medical? Isabella Family Medical is our hospital's largest cooperation partner. If we offend them, I think this matter should be downplayed and settled. That's right. Anyway, no one died. Give Dr. Aurora a disciplinary action and this matter is over. My dad was so angry that his face turned pale. Pointing at those high-level executives who were speaking, he roared, "Do you mean that because Dr. Isabella is the daughter of a certain cooperation company, Dr. Aurora, who has done nothing wrong, should bear everything?" Looking at these people, I felt a wave of sadness. They could actually push me into the abyss for the sake of interests. The high-level executives looked at each other, their eyes dodging. And my dad's face was darker than the bottom of a pot. With a wave of his hand, Grace immediately understood and turned on the large screen in the conference room. The high-definition picture instantly occupied the entire screen. It was the surveillance video before the laboratory accident. Isabella's face instantly turned pale. Her lips trembled and she kept shaking her head. Impossible. This is impossible. Didn't the hospital clearly prohibit installing surveillance cameras in the laboratory? My dad gave her a cold glance. This laboratory is originally my private laboratory for my daughter. Do I need to report to you what I want to install? Cain looked at me in shock. What? I had an expressionless face and coldly spat out a few words. Grace told you. The air seemed to freeze for a few seconds. It was so quiet that a pin drop could be heard, until someone who was bold enough stammered and opened his mouth. Director, you mean Aurora is your daughter? Grace ignored them and operated the mouse on her own, continuing to play the surveillance video. In the picture, I was wearing a white lab coat and a mask. I was conducting the experiment methodically. Everything was normal. Suddenly, the experimental container in front of me spontaneously started to burn without warning. Flames shot up and thick smoke billowed. Seeing this, Cain immediately pointed at the screen and said, "This is it. Aurora, you must have made an operational error, but don't worry, I can take the disciplinary action for you." Isabella obviously breathed a sigh of relief. Tears began to gather in her eyes again. Looking weak and helpless. I really didn't want to make Aurora so embarrassed. It's all my fault. If only I had reminded her earlier. My dad suddenly slapped the table, scaring Isabella so much that she trembled. But those high-level executives who were like grass on both sides of the wall had long been frightened by Isabella's acting skills and the reputation of the Isabella family. They all lowered their heads. Director, since this is the case, why not just let it go? One of them is the daughter of Isabella Family Medical, and the other is your daughter. If things get big, it will be bad for everyone. I admit that for a moment, I had doubts about myself. However, this doubt only lasted for a few seconds. After all, I had done this experiment hundreds of times. I could do it correctly even with my eyes closed. Moreover, my experimental project is not flammable at all. Even if there is an error, it is impossible to cause spontaneous combustion. Grace gave me a look of relax, and the corners of her mouth slightly rose. Then she said, "Leaders, you only saw Aurora's experimental container spontaneously combust, but you didn't see what she actually did at that time, right?" Indeed, there were many instruments placed in front of my test container, blocking my actions. In the surveillance video, only the operation of my upper body could be seen. But Grace suddenly enlarged the glass cabinet behind my test bench several times. In the picture, Isabella sneaked up to my test bench. When I wasn't paying attention, she secretly poured an unknown reagent into my experimental container. The whole action ended in just a few seconds. I suddenly clenched my fist tightly, burning with anger. "Isabella." My dad pointed at Isabella and asked, "What else do you have to say?" Isabella suddenly fell to the ground with a pale face. "This must be a misunderstanding. No. It's Grace. You made this video through malicious editing, right?" Just then, my dad said something into his phone, and the door of the conference room was suddenly pushed open forcefully. My dad's assistant walked in with a solemn expression. Behind him was an elegant woman with a livid face. The noblewoman scanned the conference room sharply with her eyes. Finally, she fixed her eyes on Isabella. Miss Isabella? The daughter of Isabella Family Medical? Isabella's father? The high-level executive stood up at once and looked at my dad tremblingly. Director. Why not settle it privately? Our hospital really can't lose the support of Isabella Family Medical. That's right, look, people have come in person. My dad sneered, lit a cigarette, and slowly exhaled a smoke ring. Isabella's father, take a good look. Is this really your daughter? Hearing the words Isabella's father, Isabella's face became even uglier. She kept lowering her head, her body trembling slightly, and dared not look directly at the noblewoman. The noblewoman glanced at her contemptuously and snorted. My daughter is still studying abroad for a graduate degree. Today I will come and see which audacious person dares to impersonate my daughter. After saying that, the noblewoman grabbed Isabella's chin and forced her to look up. She is quite beautiful. But why is her heart so malicious? The high-level executives were still worried about Isabella just now. At this moment, they seemed to have changed into different people. Are you kidding me? She actually dared to deceive our hospital. Such a person should be sent to prison. She almost caused our director's daughter to be slandered. This is really outrageous. Cain originally wanted to say something, but was scared back by Isabella's eyes. In the end, he only managed to utter a sentence with a crying tone, Isabella, how could you do this to Aurora? To be honest, I only felt extremely disgusted. This man is really extremely hypocritical. Isabella suddenly burst out laughing as if she had heard some great joke. Cain? What right do you have to say me? Didn't you also enjoy my lies? She shook off the noblewoman's hand and pointed at Cain's nose and scolded, since you thought I was the daughter of Isabella Family Medical, haven't you been following me like a dog and begging for pity? Am I wrong? Ha 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 ha. You pretended to save me, wasn't it also for yourself? You hypocritical gentleman. Although I hate Isabella very much, I have to admit that what she said is right. Cain is a complete hypocrite. Everything became clear. Several policemen in uniforms came in and said to Isabella, Miss Isabella, you are suspected of intentional injury and fraud. Please come with us. Isabella's face turned ashen, and her body swayed. She looked at Cain in horror. Cain, save me. Save me. However, Cain just turned his head coldly as if he didn't know her. Isabella slumped to the ground in despair, like a withered flower. After Isabella was taken away by the police, the people in the conference room dispersed in a hubbub. Only I, Grace, and Cain, who was standing there like a log, were left. Aurora, I'm sorry. I was also deceived by Isabella. Cain suddenly rushed in front of me, full of guilt, as if the person who had stood by indifferently just now wasn't him. Believe me, I love you. It's so disgusting. Look at yourself. Grace pushed him away and patted her hands in disgust as if she had touched something dirty. I looked at Cain coldly and curled up the corner of my mouth in a sarcastic arc. Isabella needs a dog, but I, Aurora, don't. Isabella's case was quickly accepted and brought to court. In the end, she was sentenced to 1 year in prison and had her medical license revoked. But later, because of her good behavior in prison, she was released early. Cain was kicked out by my dad. Other hospitals didn't dare to use him either. He changed from a somewhat famous doctor to a person everyone shouted at and despised. A year later, I was almost fully recovered. After getting my dad's consent, I returned to work at the hospital. But unexpectedly, on the first day back at work, I saw Cain again. I saw him wearing a baseball cap and a mask, sneaking into the hospital. Grace pursed her lips in disgust. He doesn't think that dressing up like this, no one will recognize him, right? I was stunned for a moment. Grace came closer and said with a mischievous smile on her face, you don't know, he got that disease. TSK. Our hospital is an authority in this regard. He can only come here for treatment. It's really retribution. I couldn't help but sneer. This disease really suits him. When I got off work in the evening and walked to the parking lot, Cain suddenly appeared in front of me. I was so scared that I instinctively let out a cry of "ah." Seeing this, he quickly wanted to help me. I also subconsciously dodged. He touched his head and said with an embarrassed smile, "I heard the nurse say that you were back today, so. Aurora, do you know how long I have been looking for you? We haven't broken up. How can you leave me?" I took a deep breath and said expressionlessly, "I told you we broke up a year ago. Don't look for me anymore." Cain suddenly grabbed my wrist forcefully, right on my old injury. The pain made me gasp. "Let go." But he exerted even more force, gritted his teeth and said, "Aurora, if it weren't for your dad, how would I end up in this situation today? Shouldn't you be responsible for me?" I sneered. "You are really ridiculous. Having a venereal disease and still telling me to be responsible for you. Have some shame." His face instantly turned as ugly as a pig's liver. In a fit of rage, he raised his hand and wanted to hit me. At this moment, a pink handbag hit him hard in the face. "Cain, you bastard." I suddenly turned around. It was Isabella. After being in prison for more than half a year, she was not as delicate as before. At this time, her face was full of anger. Isabella pointed at his nose and cursed loudly, "As soon as I got out, I looked for you. But you fucking treated me like a free prostitute and dumped me after using me. And you still dare to come to find this bitch Aurora behind my back." Cain was stunned by the beating. After a few seconds, he came to his senses and pushed Isabella away. "Get out of here. Look at yourself in the mirror and see what kind of person you are. You are not worthy to be compared with Aurora. Aurora is the director's daughter. What are you? Cain is really hopeless." I sneered and deliberately said loudly, "Cain, you can't delay this venereal disease. Remember to come for follow-up visits every day and don't infect others." "What?" Isabella's eyes widened immediately and she screamed in disbelief. "Cain, you actually have a venereal disease? Cain, you hurt me." After saying that, the two started fighting in the parking lot. I didn't want to deal with the two of them. I got directly into the car, slammed the door shut with a bang, and locked it. As a result, these two people were like crazy dogs. The more they quarreled, the more fierce it became. I rolled my eyes and directly messaged the security captain in the work group. "There are two crazy dogs fighting in the parking lot. Come and deal with it quickly." As soon as the message was sent, there was a loud bang. I looked up suddenly and saw Isabella lying in a pool of blood. There was also a car parked beside her. The driver was terrified and kept shouting, "Oh my God." Cain took off running but was caught by the security guard who came over. Colleagues from the hospital also came in a rush. Isabella died on the spot. I heard that she was 5 weeks pregnant. And Cain was clearly captured by the surveillance camera in the parking lot. It was he who pushed Isabella out. In the end, he was convicted of intentional homicide. As a doctor, I know his disease cannot be cured. For the rest of his life, rot slowly in prison. He deserves it. The end.